Hello, this is Micah. I'm going to go give you a play-by-play about love addiction because I get a lot of Ask Micah questions where people watch my videos and they're concerned whether or not they have love addiction. We may show some signs of it in our relationship addiction, jumping from relationship to relationship, different things like that. But I'm going to get a little more in depth to it, and that way you know if it's something you need to seek professional help for, or if it's something you need some integrative coaching done with. First of all, why do we need love in the first place? Why would this even be an issue? Well, love is wonderful. It's in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It increases our confidence. It gives us support. When it's healthy, we know there's always someone there that can help strengthen our character, because that's probably one of our own goals, to grow and evolve as human beings. They help us see things that we forget about ourselves, that help us make life worth living. It can teach us patience. It motivates us, helps us make our goals, and it feels really good. Love creates hormones, regardless of the type of love. And I'll do a video based on different loves later. But the love hormones that I'm going to primarily talk about are oxytocin and vasopressin. Oxytocin is excellent in relieving stress, and it can be released in different ways. This is just one way. And it also is released when a woman has a baby and she's breastfeeding. And so it can help reduce the chances of postpartum depression when a mother is breastfeeding. Vasopressin is actually very potent, especially for men. This is something that men will use. It makes it more of a bond for them when they cuddle after sex, especially. But this is released most when you are cuddling with someone. It encourages the bonding. It's called the bonding hormone. So this is a way of someone almost attaching to their mate. So if someone avoids doing this, it's because on some level they want to avoid bonding with someone. What goes wrong in love addiction? There's usually a predisposition to addictive behavior, probably genetically. There could be addictive behavior in the person's background. So that's a factor. It has a lot to do with how someone grows up as a child. If the environment or primary caregiver parent, if the child's interpretation is that they're not being nurtured, then that is a recipe for future addictive tendencies towards love and relationships, because the child will develop distorted, shaky, even non-existent boundaries because they aren't learning those in their environment. And they learn to cope with this through fantasy. I use my favorite Disney princess, Aurora, in my picture. And I think Disney was a little too obvious for me, even as a child. So I projected more onto the concept of what I would see in those movies onto people in my real life. People usually will develop any addictive pattern because they want to shield themselves from unbearable pain, and also to resolve something painful from the past. And this tactic is learned again in childhood when we don't have all the information, our brains aren't fully developed, we aren't interpreting the world completely accurately. So we're carrying that frame of reference, that filter, and we're projecting it into our adult life and into our expectations of our adult relationships with other people. This will manifest in romantic love, sexual love, friendships even, and children. We project expectations onto all of these, including our children and how they should behave in our parent-child relationship. Sponsors, gurus, religious figures, and even celebrities, people we haven't even met. People will get lost in fantasy as a coping mechanism around people that they have or have not met. The main signs would be an abnormal preoccupation with love, including a person's choice of entertainment. If they're obsessed with romantic movies or certain types of music, there's not a lot of variety, but it's constantly almost obsessive around one topic. Even if it's negative, it's still an obsessive thought process. It's consuming too. And the person is often obsessed with finding the one, even if they're not articulating those exact words. You will see it in how they post on social media, the kind of content they're sharing, and sometimes what it is they're not saying. And they lack true intimacy. They don't really understand what intimacy is, and they fear it to some degree. They have short, highly intense relationships. The more intimate it becomes, the more afraid they become. They crave initial rush, and they become restless and anxious over time when the relationship begins to get settled into some type of normalcy. They expect someone else to solve their problems, care for, and or rescue them, which attracts, and you'll see below, love avoidance, emotionally unavailable people, manipulators, and abusers, because those are the types of people that are looking for or even pray for someone to rescue to validate what they're experiencing on the other end of the spectrum. A love addict is going to demand unconditional positive regard at all times. This can even show up in work. I know that I've even caught myself in wanting validation at work more than I really need to. So it's something to be mindful of in all relationships. And they can create conflict if their issue or expectation continues to go unresolved. And this is something, again, expectations are huge with love avoidance. And if you aren't living up to the expectation, or the relationship isn't, which none really could because it's based on a fantasy that they started to develop in childhood, then these will be the people that create some kind of drama to get recognition. There are similarities in love and sex addiction. They're constantly seeking new romantic or sexual partners. Inability or difficulty being alone. They use sex or seduction to hook or hold on to a partner. They use sex or romantic intensity to tolerate difficult experiences and emotions. They detach. They have detached and unhealthy relationships. They're desperate and alone, out of relationships. They avoid sex and or relationships for a long period of time to solve the problem, which is another end of the spectrum. So if you're seeing the extremes in someone where they're going through long dry spells, either sexually or in relationships, to try to cure themselves, that's only the opposite end of the spectrum. And it's the balance that they still haven't figured out. They mistake intense sexual experiences for love because they get that flood of hormones after sex released into their body, and they assume it's love. And they're unable to leave unhealthy relationships, and they continue to return to previously unhealthy relationships because on some level they feel that if they resolve something that's unhealthy, then it's going to somehow resolve whatever was unhealthy in childhood that is causing all of this. And it may be unconscious that why they're doing it, but this is still why. In therapy, they would address the stuff from the past, and in coaching and body work, it's more present focused, and what can you do to start shifting the behavior in the now and create new goals. So love addiction recovery and prevention. Recognize what triggers you have and make sure you have a support system, a strong sponsor in place, so that when something triggers you, to want to feel rescued on some level. And remember, the sponsor isn't there to rescue you. The sponsor is going to give you tools to make sure that you know how to rescue yourself to some degree. But a good coach / sponsor will help you figure that out for yourself and hold you to a consistent schedule. Learn to feel safe feeling and expressing emotional intimacy, and practice various levels of intimacy before sexual and physical intimacy in a romantic relationship. Gradually introduce healthy habits into your daily routine, even if it's just, doing a few yoga stretches in the morning when you first wake up, or changing one thing about your diet. Just introduce small things to where you're showing a commitment, but you're showing it to yourself, because that's important. Start early by learning healthy, nurturing practices that we can teach our children. So as you learn healthy, nurturing practices, and the younger you are that you start doing this, then the easier it is for your children and for other people to learn from your example and to prevent this in the future. Be comfortable being alone long enough to learn how to fall in love with you. Why is it someone would want to become intimate with you? What is it that you're afraid of sharing emotionally? And what is it that you're willing to open up about and at what stages. Learn what your boundaries are. Accept that you do not have to be a victim over and over again, and you're putting yourself in the victim state, which is a form of self-abuse. Have the courage to talk about it with someone, somebody you trust, without an expectation in return. Learn from any guilt you're feeling in order to let it go. It has a lesson, guilt has a lesson in it, but hanging on to it turns it into shame. So release the desire to hang on to shame, because that's another way of victimizing yourself and getting unhealthy attention. Learn mindful practices and practice regular self-nurturing. If you can understand intimacy, then maybe we can prevent this becoming greater issue than it already is. Learn how to have deep and meaningful face-to-face conversations. Men like side by side. Some people in general aren't comfortable face-to-face, so sit side by side next to someone and have a deep conversation. Recognize what your boundaries are around that as you heal. And practice learning what the state of being is as opposed to doing, because a love addict is constantly doing something in order to not feel or to avoid feeling pain. Notice when you begin to feel uncomfortable and feel the need to do something, especially if that something is sex, because a love addict will resort to sex in order to feel better. Get involved in healing practices that nurture yourself. Diet and exercise as a source of self-intimacy and nurturing, because there's really no greater form of self-intimacy, honestly, than the food that you put into your mouth. It becomes part of who you are, and how much care you're taking of your physical body, which will inadvertently affect your mental, emotional, and spiritual health as well. Get trauma and or addiction therapy depending on the severity. If it's something that's significant and you need to resolve things from your past to break a pattern, absolutely seek a mental health care professional that specializes in these things and knows how to form relationships that are healthy with a client and can teach you healthy boundaries. And then to support that, get mind, heart, and body integrative therapies. So this would include, which is what Micah does, this would include integrative bodywork coaching sessions to teach you skills to manage thoughts, emotions, discomforts, behaviors that can trigger any kind of addictive behavior. Becoming familiar with your body and mind and the sensations that you feel in it can make you more secure and confident in yourself, and recognize when there's an actual threat to your mental, emotional, physical, or spiritual health. So that is all. Visit missmicah.com if you want to learn more or need a support system as you work through this process. And I appreciate you for listening. Let me know if you have more questions.